So I'm Eli Portnoy, General Manager of ThinkNear, and just to give you a really quick overview of, or background on myself, I started ThinkNear about 3 years ago, and when I co-founded it, the basic premise was location is what makes mobile interesting. When I thought of mobile devices and how I use them, it's a portable device that's on me all day long and all night long. And so the idea that it also had really, really precise location capabilities was exciting. And so we set about building the most precise location advertising platform that we could. And about a year ago, Telenav, who for those of you who don't know, is a company that's been building GPS solutions for the last 14 years and has billions and billions of data points about how people use their phones to actually take action, acquired us. And so when we merged the two companies, what we ended up with was really precise location capabilities combined with lots and lots of first-party data, which allowed us to go beyond Location 1.0, so beyond the geofence, and really start thinking about mobile and location as a way to find audiences. And with me is Michael Winner, who's the managing director of digital at PhD. He really needs no introduction. I mean, he is a thought leader when it comes to everything digital. You've probably heard him speak before, definitely heard many of his thoughts. He has over 16 years of experience in the industry and really understands digital and all of the components of digital, including mobile, from a very, very, very detailed perspective. So really excited to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I thought I'd start off with a question that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and that relates to sort of history. So from your vantage point, seeing all of digital emerge, how has the evolution of mobile compared to the evolution of some of the other digital mediums?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a bit of back to the future. I mean, there's so many parallels between the early days of digital, is there a lot of reverb, and mobile. And I think one of the things that is probably most striking is just how fast mobile's moving. I mean, I think when digital came around, there wasn't so much of a basis for what this evolution or this revolution was going to be, so it had a little bit of time to kind of mature. But mobile, I think, given digital's background, it has expectations that are, frankly, a little outsized, I think, at the moment. But there are so many parallels, whether it's from, expectations to ad serving to ad units to, trying to figure out what it all is at the same time. Is it social? Is it is it a different kind of medium? Is it is it just for news? So I think the parallels are striking.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like on the one hand, it's moved a lot faster because we've had this cheat sheet. We've seen how online sort of progressed, and so we've seen the evolution of programmatic and some of the other components, and we've been able to sort of fast forward, but at the same time, some of the nuances of what makes mobile unique haven't really caught up. We haven't actually had the time to really digest them and figure them out.
Yeah, and I think we're screwing ourselves a little bit because I think we've tried to move it so fast. I think we've tried to, unfortunately, take some of the maybe bad parts, and I don't think we've necessarily learned from some of the mistakes. I mean, thankfully, we don't have little pop-up or pop-under ads in mobile, but I think there is this, rush to try to figure out how we're going to monetize it, get every dollar, every cent out of it, which is probably why half the room left when I got up here because I don't buy stuff, but I think that there's a lot of good lessons that we can learn, and I think the nuances are what is so interesting and so unique about mobile, where it completely starts to differ from PC or desktop and display.
So let's talk a little bit about the positive. So in the way that it is different and diverging, what do you think are some of the key things that differentiate mobile in a positive way?
I think the first thing is, we were talking about it a bit the other day, is it's as a device, right, as kind of this thing that's always on you, it has become, and I think will continue to become even more so, this remote control, right? We're talking about this remote control for your life. It does things because of the fact that it is intimate, the fact that the computing power and the the amount of different kind of applications and uses that it provides. It's things that desktop, from an advertising and from a consumer standpoint, it's not really there because it's not on you all the time. I think it does that really well. I think the fact that it's getting, frankly, smarter, right? I mean, desktop is pretty smart. But I mean, the fact that it's getting smarter because of what you do, because like how Google kind of starts to anticipate what's coming up next. It knows what's on your calendar. It knows your commute in the morning. So it's starting to get smarter about your life and helping you to organize your life in a way that is incredible, right? I mean, and the fact that also it allows you to kind of take charge of your life in a different way. It empowers you. And it's interesting because it, quote, started out as a phone, right? But it's become so much more. But yet it has maintained and retained the fact that it is a communication device, right? So whether you're using it for FaceTime or you're using it for SMS or using it for social updates, it still has enabled you to communicate. It's just changed from voice to other types of media.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's almost like this concept of connectedness where there's all these different medias and mediums that we're interacting with, and then there's this phone that we have on us that's acting as a remote control. I know we talked a little bit about that, but I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, how we've attacked that or addressed that at PhD is, where a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we had social, mobile, search, and gaming as kind of very separate specialties. We've brought them all together while still maintaining the specialty of them. We've brought it all together as connected platforms, right? Because what we've seen is where one, starts and where one ends, there is no distinction. And whatever the number, 60, 70% of Facebook updates are happening on your phone, when the amount of searches that are happening, generating from mobile, the fact that your phone has become a gaming device, it's really, it's crazy to start to distinguish them. Now, depending on the content or the context of those devices or where you're coming in contact with, your Facebook profile or your updates will determine how we should think about programming. But, but I don't think, it's not convenient to separate them. And the fact that it starts to interact with all other types of media, whether it be out of home, television, print, even digital, traditional digital, has really become this kind of connective tissue between all of media. And as I said, I mean, that is not going away, right? As a matter of fact, I think that's only going to accelerate when you start thinking about cars, right? When you start looking at wearable technology, when you start looking at all these things that essentially are tethered, right, to your mobile device.
That's amazing. So when you think about all of this connectedness that's emerging and this new, I guess, industry trend that we're seeing, are you thinking of it more as a like cross-screen retargeting, where you're looking to find the same audience and just thinking of the screens as different extensions or different ways to target them, or is it deeper than that? Does it go further than that?
I think it goes deeper than that, because I think, while retargeting is great and it seems to have been this holy grail, although it keeps getting further out of reach, I think that because the fact that people are originating their experiences from different points, right, where it doesn't all have to start on your desktop or it all doesn't have to start in TV, means that you have to kind of start to look at all those signals coming in, but also think about each channel, right, as potentially origination point, but also how do you think about telling that story, right, to that consumer based on that content, context, and that device, right? And as much as I can kind of figure out where I've seen them before, if I've seen them before, great. But I think they're all very unique channels.
So talking specifically about mobile, if it is its own unique channel and you have to think about it within the context of this connected platform idea, but still individually, how would you think about developing or implementing a campaign on mobile? What are the first things you would do?
Yeah, and I think, and this is probably not unique given that it's almost 4 o'clock today, but you have to start with the consumer, right? And I think increasingly you have to start thinking about mobile first, right? Given that it is the thing that's probably closest to the consumer, it's the thing that I I got in trouble the last time I was up on this stage for saying this, but it's the thing that, you turn to first in the morning, and it's the thing that you probably say goodnight to last at night. And my wife isn't here, so she won't be offended again. But that's it. But it's an important distinction because there's no other channel, right, like that. And so from a consumer standpoint or from a marketing standpoint, how do you start to kind of program around that? How do you start thinking about, the time of the day when somebody's taking their phone out? How do you start thinking about, location? I know panel before was talking a bunch about location. We're going to talk more about it, but how do you start thinking about location in respect to, it's not just geofencing, but do I know, like, to and from wherever, somebody's going every day? Do I know that, like, just because they seem to be checking in at a, say, gas station every day, is it that, they work at the gas station, or they're filling up their car, or that's where they get their coffee? So I think you have to take what it's capable of doing and think, put yourself in that consumer mindset, right? Think about what's going to be of value to them. Think about what role you play in providing value and starting to deliver it.
And so it sounds like the key concept to think about in creating a mobile campaign is the context of the consumer and how they're thinking about their interaction with the ad when they see it. So how does that actually come into play when you translate that into targeting? How do you think about then taking that concept of context and looking for the right targeting parameters or the right audience or the right way to reaching that specific user that you're looking to get in front of?
I think you got to be really fast, right? I mean, it's this ever evolving. It's much more dynamic because of that. But I think there's a lot of signals and there's a lot of data points that we can start to think about that are going to influence those decisions, but they happen really, really quickly. And that could be based off of different apps that they've downloaded. It could be based off of different activities that they've exhibited. So I think from a targeting standpoint, you have to kind of ingest a lot of those things really fast and figure out, is it even worth talking to that person at that moment, right? Am I going to make a difference? Am I going to be able to kind of break through? Am I going to give them something that's of value? Again, I think it's all about delivering value, way more than probably it matters on any other channel, where it's always important, don't get me wrong, but I think you can probably get by with it. I think, unfortunately, to date, we haven't done as great a job in doing that. I think we've taken these really smart devices, we call them smartphones, and we've created really stupid ads.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me a little bit of about a year and a half ago, I was in New York City. We're based in Los Angeles, and I was walking down 34th Street, and I was thinking of, for months, I was thinking about this idea of context and really creating value in the way we deliver ads. And it just so happened that day I was walking by 34th Street, and just as I was walking by, I saw a bunch of street vendors basically with tables selling all sorts of different things. And I think they were selling DVDs and sunglasses, maybe some purses. And just as I was walking by, it started to rain. And as those drops of water started falling, they all flipped their carts over and they started selling umbrellas. And to me, that was a really deep aha moment because it sort of brought to light what makes mobile so interesting and unique. It's this idea that the seller, the advertiser, the street vendor knows so much about you. They know where you are. They know what's happening around you or what you're doing, the fact that you're walking. And they can even tell the weather and other contextual elements like the fact that it was raining, and they deliver this perfect message. So I've always been fascinated by this idea of context.
Yeah, and again, I think that's such a powerful thing that, again, I don't think we're taking full advantage of, but there's so much information potentially within somebody's phone, through all their various applications that either they've downloaded, that they use regularly, right, things that they've put into them. Don't want to try to get into the NSA, but I think that there's just ways of, building more of that contextual relevance, for that consumer from a marketing standpoint at that moment that's going to, again, provide more utility, kind of separate themselves also from the pack. Because, while it's a smaller screen and maybe there's not as much ads going on, you're still fighting for that mind share, right? You're still fighting to kind of be seen, to be relevant, to make an impact and to, create a positive experience.
Yeah, it
And
was
so like so somebody who's going to give you an umbrella is creating a positive experience, right? What's that kind of umbrella moment that we can create for somebody?
I like that, the umbrella moment. One of the things that's
Write that down, umbrella, 2 L's.
one of the things that was interesting about the panel before us, and just generally about how people think about location, is that for a lot of folks, location means geofencing. It means this idea of proximity. But we're seeing the market evolve away from location 1.0 and towards what I guess people are calling location 2.0, this idea that knowing where someone is isn't just about knowing what's near them, but it's also about understanding the context of who they are, what they're doing. It's basically about finding an audience. Is that something that you see advertisers starting to take advantage of? Do you see that as a trend going forward?
I think it's something we're starting to look more at. Yeah, because I think, what we found, I think the panel before was talking about, just because you know that somebody's within 10 feet of something doesn't necessarily mean necessarily that they're interested in that. But I think if you know over time, right, that that's the way that they commute, or maybe that's where they work, or, take other kind of signals, then it makes you smarter about that. And it also allows you not necessarily to have to target them just within, that 10-foot radius. You can start to kind of impact, you can start to kind of get ahead of the curve, if you will, in terms of influencing that behavior, giving them an offer that may be more relevant as they're getting someplace as opposed to just when they're there. So I think it's a big game changer. And I think it also helps us, frankly, to be smarter about that targeting, because I think a lot of times we've been sending messages, like almost mixed messages, right? Like while we thought that knowing where they were was a great way to kind of weed out some of the noise, I think it's also created a lot of noise in the process. So getting smarter about that location, getting smarter about those patterns will allow us to better target and again be more relevant.
Yeah, one of the things that I also find really interesting is that even if we do get smarter about the targeting, even if we're able to implement all of these strategies, ultimately targeting is only half the game. So how should advertisers be thinking about the second part of it, which is, okay, you've targeted the right user, how do you message them in the right way?
Yeah, I think they kind of go hand in hand, right? And I think it's, along with that targeting, one, I think the messaging has to be richer than it is, right? Any static experience, unless it's search, is just that, it's static. So I think we have to be better at, using, again, that smart device with stupid ads. It's being smarter about how do we deliver a rich experience, right? How do we take that context and content and know when it's appropriate to deliver a video message, right, versus an offer message, versus maybe something that is a little bit more of a location prompt. Are there ways to tie into other utilities, other applications on their phone? If it's about programming your DVR, right, sending a calendar reminder. So I think the messaging has to catch up. And, for those of you stuck around for 2 panels now, it is. The creatives are not necessarily there yet. It's not a knock to them. This is, it's a lot of work. And you're talking about a lot of work that also is very dynamic, which I think is one of the biggest issues, right? You're trying to create hundreds of ads, not just one ad. And you have to try to start to, again, think about that consumer, think about their mindset, think about what's going to be important to them. And, while not everything needs to be tailored down to the individual, you do have to create a lot more use cases, right? And you have to start thinking through and being able to kind of program in a way that you never had before. And the only thing that's, the media is only going to take you so far, right? Ultimately, it is the message that is going to resonate. It's not to say the media isn't important, obviously, there are great publications, there's great things out there, but it's you can't survive just on, running on Yahoo alone.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You taking notes? Yeah, cool. Awesome. And so if an advertiser creates the right campaign, has the right targeting in place, puts the right messaging together, that should theoretically lead to a really compelling campaign. How are advertisers actually embracing this? Are advertisers starting to really think about mobile as a key part of their strategy, or is it still very much in the experiment stage?
I think it's still in the experiment stage. I think everybody knows that they have to be there. But I still think it's about checking boxes, right? As opposed to starting. I think you have to start with mobile first. Because of all the stuff we've been talking about, right? Because of the intimacy, because of what and how you can use the device so much differently. I think the fact that more and more people are relying on it, to get their news, to manage their lives, to check into places, to look at reviews of products, right? I mean, it's kind of crossed everything from commerce to shopping to general information to gaming to those kind of downtime moments. So I think you have to start there. But again, but the problem is also that it doesn't fit neatly into a lot of the boxes that people are comfortable with. We're still figuring out what the right metrics are. We're still figuring out what the right ROI is. We're still figuring out, how to track people, how to measure things, to create some uniformity. So I think you have to still give it a little time, but I think we have to be. But I think we have to do a lot better job in putting real effort from both sides into figuring it out. It can't just be about checking the box because I need to have mobile as part of my campaign because I need to have mobile as part of my campaign.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. So we talk about we talked earlier in the conversation about some of the really interesting things that make mobile unique, but we're going to talk about the negatives, about some of the pieces that still need to be built out to be able to go to an advertiser and say, hey, this absolutely makes sense, and we've crossed off absolutely any question you could possibly have. So what are some of those key pieces of infrastructure that still need to be developed in your mind for mobile to realize its full potential?
I think simply just even ad serving. Right? I think just even how do you execute a mobile campaign efficiently, right? I think coming up with what are the right metrics, right? I mean, I think unfortunately we still rely too much on click-through. I think we're totally screwed if we continue to go down that route. But what are those right metrics? And I think unfortunately they're probably going to be somewhat unique to each campaign also, right? So I think, again, some of the mistakes of the past, click-through being one of them, right? It was very convenient. I think it's going to take work. It takes work to understand, especially something that's so personal and so individual, what is appropriate to be tracked, what should be tracked, how do you assign value to that, right? How do you start to tie that into your offline media or even your, quote, traditional digital media? So I think those are, I think it's still in that kind of fundamental building block stage.
Yeah, so lots to look forward to as the market continues to evolve, but it's amazing that even with all of these pieces that are not fully baked, the amount of successful campaigns that are happening is just increasing every single day, and so much success. So what are some of the cool campaigns that you've seen that actually worked?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, because I think that it still is, because it has proven so quickly. I mean, it's relatively new still, right? And the amount of advancement that's happened in the mobile space, with each new release of, the operating system, with each new, camera that's come out on the phone, it's just opened up a wealth of opportunity. I think we ran a campaign a couple of years ago, or last year, which was really interesting, which was for Foot Locker, and it was this Kickstagram. We partnered with Instagram, and it was amazing because we were able to kind of shorten the distance between somebody, taking a picture, uploading it, and liking and fanning and kind of showing their personality off in a way that had never been done before because it was such a tedious process. But by able to shorten that window, we were able to drive engagement, right? And we were able to take advantage of something that was so natural, but hadn't been done before. And that's the thing, right? People are doing activities on their phone, like taking pictures, that can play real value or can create real value for a marketer if you know how to take advantage of it. I think we've had a lot of success, almost overwhelming success sometimes, with app download programs, for Starbucks, for HBO Go, a little bit because of how we've been able to target them, because we've been able to read the right signals, and take advantage, and also use offline media to help drive that. Again, kind of thinking more holistically about the user and the experience that we're trying to create.
That's great. Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left. I thought we'd open it up to the audience. I'm sure they have lots of questions they'd also like to ask you.
Actually, can I get you to start that question over with the microphone, just so that the camera can pick it up as well? Coming right to you.
The notable points that you mentioned that require further standardization, so tracking, measurement, ad serving, cross-channel attribution. I'm just wondering, in the overall ecosystem, if you've seen any players emerge as leaders in addressing or solving these issues.
I don't think, I mean, to no offense of anybody perhaps in the room or sitting next to me, I mean, I don't think to the degree, right, that this is going to become the de facto standard, right? I think that it's still a pretty wide open space. I mean, I think there's some key players in the market that are well established in each of those areas, which, I think give them a leg up. Google, right? I mean, et cetera. But I don't think anybody's emerged just yet, but I would venture to think that the big names are either going to remain the big names, or they're going to require the right companies to to kind of solidify their position.
Any other questions?
As screens get more fragmented, what are your thoughts on responsive as opposed to individual apps, individual sites for each different kind of screen?
I think responsive design is the only way forward. I mean, I think that, particularly from a client standpoint, I mean, who the hell wants to pay, right, some agency or somebody else, or even bring it in-house to have to create all of that stuff? I mean, you got from probably 3.5-inch screens to 10-inch. I mean, it's crazy. So responsive design, I think, is the only way to efficiently scale that.
It costs just as much as 3 sites built at the same time.
But I think it's fair point. But I think that at least it allows you to kind of think in a more straightforward manner than you might. And I think and I think the influence also. I think what's been interesting is the influence that design, especially mobile design, right, is starting to have more on desktop design, and obviously as touch and gesture and things like that start to play a role in other types of screen formats, eventually into TV more and more. I think at least having a more common design language is going to be helpful.
Michael, I got a quick question for you. You see a lot of the Kickstarter campaigns with the phones, where people kind of create these modular phones that are easily fixable and replaceable. Where have I guess advertisers looked into potentially kind of teaming forces with these new companies, these startups, these builders, in order to basically kind of have some built-in ad time or ad space to help defray the cost of the actual phone?
That's a great question. I wish I can answer it better. I don't really know. Hopefully maybe somebody else knows out there, because I think that's a wonderful question. But I do think that there is an opportunity, and I think that it is important for marketers and agencies and brands and publishers to keep a close eye on those spaces, because they are exciting, and that's really where a lot of innovation is happening. And I think I think the sentiment of the question, at least, fortunately, I apologize I can't answer it very well, is right in that how do we look for opportunities to get in on the ground floor with product development and with people that are creating those experiences, because not only is that going to be a differentiator, I think it's going to be a rich source of kind of consumer insight and data that we just don't have today.
Are there any other questions for Michael? So any final thoughts?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thank you very much.